Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
All right, welcome to So Many Books, So Little Time. This is show number 27. My name is Joe Nash, and I'm here with Zina, Shevchik. We're both librarians here at the Colonie Library. If you don't know our show, the premise is very simple. I can say now for the 27th time, Zina. Zina and I go down to the new bookshelf, and we go to the technical services department where they're processing all the new books, and we get about 100 books a week on the adult side. And we brought up a whole bunch of new books, and we're going to tell you about several. So Zina, as usual, goes first.
Okay. I like to pick books that I know nothing about the subject so that I can learn something. And this book is about cars. And I do not know a thing about cars. This is called Engines of Change, A History of the American Dream in 15 Cars by Paul Ingrassia. He is a journalist. He's won the Pulitzer Prize in journalism for writing about the GM Motors financial crisis in the 1990s, 1980s, I'm not sure. But he's pretty much giving a social history of the 20th century in America, following the cars that were produced and became popular. Now, a lot more cars were produced and made popular than 15, and he says in the afterword to the book that the most difficult part of the book was not picking the Model T, which was, he said, maybe arguably the most influential car of the 20th century. Obviously, it probably is. But he says choosing the second most influential and the next 13 that he was going to put in this book because there are so many to choose from. But it is fascinating. He includes, besides the Model T, the Chevette?
Yeah.
Am I saying that right? No, Corvette.
Oh, okay.
Why? What am I thinking about the Chevette? I did write the Chevette down, but I mean the Corvette.
Okay, the Corvette.
And the Route 66, the idea of getting on the road and seeing the country and just vagabonding it, kind of. And the Cadillac, 1959 Cadillac in particular, with big fins, the VW Beetle, the VW Bus, the Corvair because of the consumer protection movement that came about because of Ralph Nader's book about the Corvair not being safe.
Unsafe at any speed.
Unsafe at any speed, the Ford Mustang, the Honda Accord, and the last one is the Prius that he talks about. But he does a short history of how the car was manufactured, how it was designed, the people involved, and what was going on in the country at that time, and what made the car influential or important in the 20th century, and it's really very interesting, very easy to read, and I think women as well as men will be interested in this book. It's not a lot of too technical material. There are pictures in here. It brings up the truck, the F-150 truck series that became so popular in, I think he said, the 1980s. I might be wrong there. But he talks about the importance of the minivan, changing this culture in the suburbs, soccer mom idea. So I highly recommend this, Engines of Change. And Joe said just before we started taping this that it has been mentioned or reviewed in the
New York Times.
New York Times. So I didn't see that. So I just saw this on the shelf and knew it was something that I wouldn't normally look at.
All right, so it sounds like he picks the real iconic
Yes.
cars of whatever era.
Well, see, to you, they might be, and to others who are listening, they might be obvious choices. But I enjoyed reminiscing in some cases.
I know the car on Route 66 was a popular character.
Because I've been driving for almost 50 years, and so that's half of the 20th century.
Okay. Well, my first book, we're filming this today on May 31st, and in the last 2 weeks, Robert Caro has brought out his 4th volume of his massive biography of LBJ, President Johnson. However, I don't have that book here because they're all out, but if you go to our LBJ section in the library, there's like 2 or 3 shelves. He's a very interesting man, very paradoxical, and here's another new book, sort of being overshadowed by the Caro book, but got good reviews, and actually my wife read this book and said it was fantastic. It's called Indomitable Will, LBJ and the Presidency by Mark Updegrove. Now, this is not a straight biography. It's a form that I think I've said before on the show that I really like. It's called an oral biography, where all different people just talk about the subject. And it's sort of like when you see a PBS special, and what do they call it, talking heads? Various people, when you see the various people talking about a person, that's kind of what the idea behind the book is. Some oral biographies just take people who are living and just string together all the different quotes under themes or just write in order. This is a little bit different because the author did a massive editing job. He took quotes from many, many people from both a slew of books, and there's tons of books about Johnson, and interspersed with all this are actual quotes from LBJ himself. From the LBJ library, there's thousands of hours of interviews, not just with LBJ, but with all the people in his circle. So this guy culls together all this stuff, all these quotes about LBJ under different topics. The Johnson treatment, you probably know what that is, when he would grab people. All the way with LBJ, the Vietnam War, of course, as Commander-in-Chief. There's a beginning part of just people's personal recollections of what he was as a human being, as a person, fascinating character. He was full of paradoxes, but many people thought a lot of people in the very beginning say he was the most fascinating person I ever met or ever will meet. So just some of the people that there's quotes from, because some of these are from older books, some of these people are obviously not alive anymore, but Joe Califano, Liz Carpenter, John Chancellor, Carl Albert, former Speaker of the House. There's a lot of news people in here quoted because they found him fascinating too. Walter Cronkite, John Connolly, former Governor Clark Clifford, Ramsey Clark, Hubert Humphrey, Haynes Johnson, Lucy Johnson. There's hundreds of people quoted. Again, Bill Moyers is in here, who usually is not in the other Johnson books. He doesn't really give interviews about Johnson, but he like I say, he took this from other sources. So, anyway, a very interesting book. My wife Jill, Zina knows, said it was fascinating. The very first quote in the book is by Jack Valenti. I'll just read. This gives you a flavor of the book. And each time someone different is talking, their names on here in boldface. So it's very interesting. But the very first quote in the book by Jack Valenti says, "I frankly didn't understand him. I loved him and I followed him, but I sure as hell didn't fathom all that made him tick." That's the first sentence. So Johnson, I keep using the word paradoxical guy. He had a lot of different moods. People loved him, they hated him. He was, he ended up his story ended up being a little bit tragic near the end. But this, if you're waiting for the Caro books, you can maybe read this one. Indomitable Will, LBJ and the Presidency, an oral biography by Mark Updegrove. Zina?
That'd be very interesting.
Oh, he was a absolutely fascinating person.
As you said, lots of contradictions in the man. This is another kind of social history in the 20th century that looked like fun to me. Women from the Ankle Down, the Story of Shoes and How They Define Us. This is by Rachel Bergstein. This is a first-time writer. I guess she graduated from Vassar College, worked in the literary industry, but this is her first book. And it's interesting to me because I'm not into shoes, as quite a few women are, I know, and it gives a history of the time period, similar to what I was talking about with the car book, The Engines of Change. I don't know that these are influential, these shoes, but they do reflect the society at the time that these shoes became popular. It starts with an Italian Ferragamo and the wartime wedge. It says 1900 to 1938. It was an Italian shoe, and I didn't know about this shoe, but they do. I don't know if you can see it. They do have little illustrations of the shoes that are being talked about or described. And this is a wedge shoe, which is actually what's popular now in 2012. Many women are back to the wedges, the high-heeled wedges, and that's what apparently Ferragamo, right? And it talks about. Well, the reason she said that she's spending time on this topic is she said that it's a mystery what women find so enthralling about shoes. She said the average woman owns upward of 10, 20, 50 or more pairs of shoes, some of which have very little practical use and languish in the back of the closet. But obviously there is something about shoes that drives women to purchase them and to wear them. It talks about some things that I am familiar with, which are the high heels, the stilettos that came into being when this says 1950 to 54, but I was being introduced to them in the late 50s and early 60s. Doc Martens, that must have been, they were flats, and I guess that must have been the sign of the suburban housewife. It talks about the Sex and the City series that Carrie Bradshaw, Sarah Jessica Parker. Was the star of the TV series, and how she made the Manolo Blahnik shoes a household word, and it talks about him and the series, and what it reflects, what it reflects in the society, what's going on in the society at the time, and certainly what women were experiencing in our society at that time. So I found it interesting. It's written really well, entertaining, but very informative, and not your usual book. So
that's a social history also.
Yes.
Through shoes.
Through shoes instead of cars. Right.
Well, I have a couple serious books here. One of the biggest sections of our library, in the new book section and upstairs, if you know our library, is the book on medicine and health, and all the different ailments and conditions, and both physical and mental, I guess I should say. But here's a brand new book, The American Cancer Society Complete Guide to Family Caregiving. It's for people who are caring for people at home, or I'm sure if they could be in a hospital too, for people with cancer, all different kinds. Oh, I'm sorry, this is for at home. The subtitle is The Essential Guide to Cancer Caregiving at Home. So this is for people who may have someone at home that they're caring for, and it's broken up into a lot of different sections: managing care, emotional responses for both patient and the caregiver, what to do, there's a big section here called Physical Side Effects of Cancer and Cancer Treatment, and each of these sections, some are like 10 pages long, some are 2 or 3, but they're for help in dealing with nausea and vomiting, fever and infection, pain, skin problems, loss of, it goes right down the line here. So you can just go right to this little section to, if you're doing caregiving. Living with long-term side effects is a whole big section. Transitioning from curing to caring, cancer treatments and clinical trials, that goes into if someone you're caring for is involved in a clinical trial, and it's put together really well, and it has some pictures and diagrams, a lot of bullet points, and it is for people who, like I say, if you're caring for anyone at home with cancer. So that's this book, and it's put out by the American Cancer Society. So I'm sure it has great information. The Complete Guide to Family Caregiving. But I was noticing when I was getting this book down at the new bookshelf, our medical section was very big. We have a whole, I think we got about at least 10. About 10 or 12 new books. They're all in this format, very easy to use on different, not just cancer, but for other ailments. It's called 100 Questions and Answers. It's a whole series. You can see them there. They're all set up very similarly. Now, this one's called 100 Questions and Answers About Prostate Cancer. And it's all, like I say, it's set up with easy format, question and answer. They're very easy. It's got charts and graphs. It's got pictures and diagrams. And literally any question you would have about prostate cancer is in here. And we have this whole series. I'll just read you the titles. I didn't bring the other ones up, but these are the books. They're all, like I say, good format, a lot of very thorough, great information. All the questions are numbered. And these are some of the other ones in this series, and they're all very well done. I was looking at a bunch of them. And they all begin with 100 questions and answers. So these are the other ones we have. 100 questions and answers about leukemia. 100 questions and answers about liver cancer. 100, okay, that's this one, prostate cancer. 100 questions and answers about advanced and metastatic breast cancer. 100 questions and answers about your child's substance abuse, your child's type 1 diabetes, your child's ADHD, from preschool to college. Some of these books are over in the parent-teacher section in the children's room. And finally, the other ones were, there's one on bladder cancer, uterine fibroids, and your child's obesity. And like I say, the format of these books very easy to use, and I get a lot of diagrams, and they're very well done. So that's 100 questions and answers on various medical conditions.
Looks very good. My next book is When Women Were Birds, 54 Variations on Voice by Terry Tempest Williams, who apparently has written several books before this and has a good following of people, of readers. I heard about this book when I was in the car listening to a radio station, and she was being interviewed. I think it was on WAMC or NPR, I'm not sure. But she was talking about, she's from a Mormon family, and she has written before about her mother, in a previous book. But this book is specifically about Terry Tempest Williams being given by her mother the journals that her mother supposedly kept during her whole life. Now, this is a tradition that Mormon women follow, that women, the women who follow the Mormon faith are expected to maintain journals their whole life, outlining their daily activities and thoughts and meditations, and then they leave them to their children. Even though Terry Tempest Williams didn't ever see her mother writing in a journal, she, I think, expected her mother to have journals, because even this author had been journaling since she was young. So on her deathbed, her mother gave her her journals, but asked her not to look at them until after she had passed away. And about a month after her mother passed away, the author went to her mother's journals, which were right where her mother said they were, and she opened them up. And one for every year of her mother's life, which was short, as she was 54, thus the 54 variations on voice, and all of the journals were blank. And that jarred me when I heard it, when she talked about it on the radio interview. And she talks about her reaction to that mystery, the dilemma, the shock. She says it was as if her mother had died twice. And this book is a biography of her response in her life forward from the time she found the blank journals, in trying to resolve the mystery. And she's writing it when she is 54, the author. So her mother died when she was 54, and Terry Tempest Williams is wrote this book when she turned 54. And there's 54 short chapters. They're not in consecutive order. They all are addressing in one way or another about women's voices and trying to solve the mystery of her mother, specifically leaving her journals that were blank. She talks about her Mormon background, her grandmother, and all the other women who influenced her. And it's a meditation, it's a mosaic, it's very inspirational. They're short chapters, and they're full of all sorts of wonderful things that will make you think for days on end. It's suggested in the reviews I read that it might be a really good book club selection, and there is even a website for this book, and it gives questions that might be used in a book club discussion, and I think that it's really, it would be really good for that, for a book club discussion. So I highly recommend it. When Women Were Birds, Terry Tempest Williams.
Now, the journals were completely blank?
Completely blank.
But it's interesting that she actually had them, though.
Yes, and that she specifically wanted her daughter to see them.
All right,
so
now
it was
you
a
got me.
gift of some kind to
All
her
right, so
daughter.
now you got me. What does she conclude? Why didn't her mother write them?
Lots of different conclusions.
Okay.
Lots of possibilities.
Well, I couldn't help but notice when I was down at the new bookshelf, and every week I had to look at all the reserves we have in the library for all the books, but vegetarianism has always been sort of popular, and vegan. Is it vegan or vegan?
I hear vegan.
All right. Well, veganism, I guess, is a subset of vegetarianism, but the only difference is it's the same as vegetarianism, but no dairy products, no eggs, no animal products of any kind, which someone told me includes honey.
Right.
But I've noticed.
No eggs.
But I've noticed in doing our reserve list every week, I have to order books that we may not own, that we have reserves for. More and more, there's a lot of books coming up on veganism. And I was down there when I was getting the medical books, I just happened to see 3 right in a row. And it must be a trend because a lot of these did have reserves on them earlier. So I didn't really look at them too closely, but I'll just give you some titles and let you know that if you want to go beyond vegetarianism to veganism, we've got a lot of books here for that. This one's called Simply Vegan by Good Housekeeping. Delicious meat-free, dairy-free recipes every family will love. And if you're nervous about non-dairy, they give you for example, some guide to non-dairy milk. Apparently I guess I didn't know some of these. There's soy milk, almond milk, rice milk, coconut milk. So those are some substitutes. And again, they just go through here on different categories. There's a whole category here: energizing breakfasts, satisfying sandwiches, eat your vegetable salads, great grilling, globe-trotting dishes, and comfort food. So this is all vegan recipes. Here's another one. It's I can't help but noticing the title. It's kind of funny. Vegan junk food. So 225 sinful snacks that are good for the soul.
Okay, what's a sinful vegan snack?
I'll just open a random here and pick one. They probably can't. Well, apple fritters. I don't know how sinful that could be, but
Sugar is allowed.
they got some things in here. Let's see, teriyaki pineapple tempeh kebab. So they go through
Lots of fruit.
vegan ricotta. So that if you want to make some cheese.
Well, wait a minute.
Yeah,
well, what's vegan ricotta?
I
That's
don't-
fascinating because they don't eat cheese.
Well,
That's the big thing.
there's-
Vegan, a lot of vegetarians eat a lot of cheese, so a vegan doesn't eat cheese.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they probably.
gonna be soy
There's some
cheese.
I lost it here.
Yeah,
They
no, it's
must
probably
have. They
gonna
must
be
have
soy
substitutes because there's one in here called sausage puffs.
What?
So obviously a vegan sausage. I don't know what it's made out of. Chopped onion. Oh, gimme lean sausage. Gimme lean. I've eaten that. That stuff's pretty good. But anyway, so vegan junk food. It got some fun recipes in here. And finally, here's another one. The vegan holiday kitchen. I guess, if you have a vegan in your family, there's always a question, what to do for Thanksgiving?
Tofurkey.
So this goes through
Tofu.
a lot of good vegan recipes for Thanksgiving, Christmas, Jewish holidays, Independence Day and summer entertaining, and then brunches and potluck dishes. So again, I'm sure that goes through with a lot of substitutes. But now I think the good thing about these books, they tell you how to get a balanced meal, even if you are a vegan. I don't know how to say it. I'm going to just use both.
You should ask your wife. She's basically a vegetarian.
She's a vegetarian.
Yeah,
yes.
so.
Now I have one little thing here that I couldn't help noticing, because I like to notice these sort of ironies of life down in our books, because the books are, the food books. On one side of these books, because they're all in a row, on the left-hand side of these books, I'm not saying this goes with being a vegan, but I just couldn't help but looking at this title, because it's one of the food books. It's called The Everything Guide to Foraging. So, I don't know if you want to eat your meals by foraging, but this book actually goes into how and where, if you want to. I don't think they're recommending you should have every meal by foraging, but it tells you.
Does it mean like eating nuts and seeds and berries and dandelions?
It says, the subtitle is Identifying,
Mushrooms.
Harvesting, and Cooking Nature's Wild Fruits and Vegetables.
Okay.
So
it's not the raw food. There's a raw food.
that's another whole movement, I guess.
Yes.
But this is, so they got the introductory chapter, The Way of the Forager, Connecting with Plants, Becoming Plant-Wise, Poisonous
How
Plants.
to know a poisonous mushroom.
Well, there's a whole poisonous section, plant families, and it goes on from there. Summer, fall, winter, growing wild, in the forager's kitchen. So this, I guess, this could be a supplement to the vegan books, The Everything Guide to Foraging.
All right.
And one other little irony of life too, next to these 4 books on the other side, I didn't bring it up, but the book was called something like The Guide to Sausage Making.
Not to vegan sausage.
No, it wasn't. But anyway, so I guess vegan and vegan cookbooks are very popular now. So
we have
a lot of
for
them.
everyone.
Okay.
And we have something for everyone. My next book is sort of a travel log journal. It's called Le Road Trip. Le is the French word for the. Le Road Trip, a traveler's journal of love in France by Vivian Swift, who I guess has written several other books that people are pleased that she's written. She has a following too. I've never seen her work before. This is the first one I've noticed. It's full of her own watercolors, which are extraordinary. It's about her trip 30 years ago in 1975 to France, and then her follow-up trip in 2005 to France with her new husband. And I would say there's at least 100 watercolors in this book, and they're just charming, and they're just feel-good pictures. Even the type is as if it was handwritten, calligraphy, and there's all sorts of charts that she makes about how to pack, and all the different kinds of cheeses in France, and all the different kinds of windows in France and balconies, the architecture. But what she's really telling is the story of her honeymoon in 2005, in contrast to her own vagabond days of traveling in France in 1975. And it's just a charming, charming book and a feel-good book, and it does have practical points in it, like it talks about how to pack for a 28-day journey in just a one carry-on, but she has pictures of the clothes. She watercolored pictures of the clothes she brought, and she paints sunsets, and she talks about the joy of just going with the flow when you're traveling in the country, the rural countryside. She's ecologically minded. They eat the way and live the way the French people do wherever they are in the city or in the country. So it gives lots of points of view about how to travel, about what to see in France, but it's not like any other travel book I've come across recently, and I highly recommend it. It actually, I think it's been given a lot of press, so it may be There may be reserves on it as well. Of course, I flip to blank spaces, blank pages without the colored watercolors. Le Road Trip, A Traveler's Journal of Love in France by Vivian Swift.
She did the painting?
She did all the paintings.
Yeah, they're very nice.
And I think she may have actually done the type as well. It's just beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful.
looks like a nice book. Well, I think it's time for us to each do one more quick book. This book might make for a good beach read, since this show will be on the summer.
That's true.
And if you like Sherlock Holmes, some consider the greatest fictional character ever created. There's been many homages to Sherlock Holmes, and many people have written in the same style as Arthur Conan Doyle. There's probably thousands of stories and books where Sherlock Holmes is the character, obviously not written by the original. What are they called? Pastiches? Is that the word?
Sounds right.
Anyway, so this is a new collection, A Study in Sherlock, stories inspired by the Holmes canon. Now, some of them try to write in the Conan Doyle style, told from the point of view of Watson, Dr. Watson. Some do it differently. But the interesting thing about this book, I'm going to read you the authors in here that are doing this. They're all very famous mystery authors. Tony Broadbent, S.J. Rosen, Philip Margolin, Lee Child's a very popular author, Thomas Perry, Colin Cottrell, Neil Gaiman, he's more of a fantasy author, Laura Lippman, Margaret Maron, Dana Stabenow, Jan Burke, Jacqueline Winspar. Now I recognize all those names. They're all very popular and famous mystery novelists. So it's also edited by Laurie King, who wrote a whole series of Sherlock Holmes when he's in his elderly days with her. I forgot the name of those.
Doesn't he have a wife in that?
I don't think so. And then Leslie Klinger, who put out the new annotated Sherlock Holmes. So they're the editors. All those stories are homages to Sherlock Holmes. They're all complete adventures. One is actually like if I can find it here, one is sort of like a graphic novel story. So it's endless, all the Sherlock Holmes thing. So this is A Study in Sherlock, stories inspired by the Sherlock Holmes canon.
That's interesting.
So one more, Zina, for you?
We recently, over the last few months, have had a series on Michael Sandel's Justice, What's the Right Thing to Do program in our library. And so I thought people who might not be aware that he's just published another book. It's called What Money Can't Buy, The Moral Limits of Markets. And this actually is I think, more written for the layperson than even the Justice book. And the Justice book is, there's lots about academic philosophy, but he brings it to the contemporary world and the moral dilemmas of our world. And this is written more specifically, I think, for the layperson rather than an academic audience, whether it be his students or his professors, his other academics. He is questioning what he thinks our country and maybe the world has become, rather than just a market economy. It's become a market society where everything is for sale, and and that's what the moral limits of market means, is what shouldn't you be allowed to buy. And he talks about, at the beginning, he just talks about, as a big example, is slavery. We decided 150 years ago that slavery, that owning another person was that you shouldn't be able to buy another person, in our country at any rate. And he talks about what is allowed in our culture these days, that you can buy speedier security checks at airports. You can buy access to high occupancy vehicle lanes on freeways, even if you're only one person in a car. If you have enough money to pay, industries are allowed to buy carbon emissions. And he talks about being able to, whether or not you should be able to buy organs, the whole idea whether if someone needs a heart or a lung or a kidney transplant, if you have more money, should you go to the front of the line? Right now, I guess you can't do that, but He talks about where the line is in being able to purchase, where money can get involved in purchasing certain rights or services or commodities. So he's against the commodification of everything in our culture. So it's written, I think, as I said, more toward the everyday person. I found it very easy to read, and his reasoning and his examples are very clear. What Money Can't Buy by Michael Sandel.
Yeah, he seems, if he's a philosopher. It seems like all his writings and his PBS thing, they're a lot about economics.
Yes, he's in the government department of Harvard.
Okay.
They call him a political philosopher,
Okay.
and he knows he's not an economist. He talks about that.
Well, that is it for this week. These are just some of the about 100 or so new books a week we get at the library. So come into the library, go to the new bookshelf if you want to see more, and we will see you next time.